Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Chiefs have 4 safeties on the field right now. Running back is Etienne on the short side. Kirk in motion, left to right. Triangle is set to the right side. Lawrence, pump faking, hit, sacked! He's sacked at the... Chris Jones gets the sack at midfield. And the Chiefs will take over on downs, officially at their own 49-yard line. Welcome back, Chris Jones, with a huge play and a sack on Trevor Lawrence. One more kneel down, and it happens, and the Kansas City Chiefs are going to get a gutsy, grinded-out win. The defense had a spectacular day against a good Jacksonville Jaguar team. The clock ticks down, and the game is... And now we got some action going on between the players instead of handshakes. Something else. You got to be careful with this. The clock ticks to zeros, and the Chiefs get a hard-fought victory, 17-9 over the Jacksonville Jaguars.
There it is, as heard over on KNSS, the Chiefs radio network. Mitch Holthus on the call. As always, the Chiefs get it done. Look, I think I might be more impressed with that win than the general masses. I'm Jacob Albracht alongside Tommy Castor. Jad Chambers producing for us here on Sports Daily. It's a Monday. It's Reaction Monday. Plenty to come on that Chiefs win Sunday, as well as the rest of the NFL. We got to talk about a loss for K-State, a win for KU by a margin maybe we didn't expect, but a win is a win. Lots to get to today on the program. Lots of interaction with you on the IHOP hotline. 869-1240 is that number, as always. Of course, brought to you by IHOP, where guests can enjoy 4 new sweet and savory biscuit options. We'll get to your calls on things here. We'll react to everything. We'll have some giveaways. We've got movie tickets to give away. We've got comedy tickets to give away. We've got hockey tickets to give away, as well as some free iced tea. So stay tuned for all your chances to win all of our prizes. Glad to be here. Tommy, how are you this morning?
I'm good. Good to be here on this Monday. Had a pretty solid betting weekend. It had been a while. I had taken a bath the last couple of weeks. But yesterday, especially in the NFL, was pretty good. So I'm feeling good this morning.
It's funny, our picks. I guess I had a really good week 1. I had a horrible betting week 1. And then I did not have a very good picks Friday, but had a much better betting week. So maybe I should stay away from the parlays. Maybe I should, but probably won't. It was good. Let's start with the Chiefs, Tommy. Look, I know that there is, generally speaking, some concern. I thought that was a great win, and for a couple of reasons. One, welcome back Chris Jones, right? Like, just a massive impact on that game. I think it was 5 quarterback pressures, a sack and a half. He had the batted ball. He was everywhere. He was Chris Jones, and that's the impact he has. And what was a really solid defensive performance in week 1 was even more impressive in week 2. So, that's good to see. And Kelsey was back and healthy. Look, I don't concern myself nearly as much, I think, as a lot of people. The headline you'll see today is concern over Chiefs offense, ? Because that's the question. They haven't been, their typical selves through 2 weeks, but I don't really care if the defense is going to play like it has now through 2 weeks against, by the way, 2 good offenses. These aren't cupcakes that they've played in the 2 opening weeks, and the defense has been really good. I feel pretty good about the Chiefs right now.
Well, the Chiefs defense kept the Jags out of the end zone the entire game. And the red zone struggles for Jacksonville pretty well documented throughout the game. They had 3 or 4 passes that were right on the out of bounds lines, like the back out of bounds line of the end zone that would have been touchdowns had, the different receivers like Calvin Ridley stayed in bounds. But overall, the Chiefs defense kept them out of the end zone, and they looked elite. Like, that unit looked elite yesterday against Jacksonville. And you mentioned all of the stats from Chris Jones, but I think that his presence really even was felt on plays that he doesn't get any credit in the stat line for.
Always. That's his thing.
Yeah. There were multiple plays where, like, I noticed one in particular where he was lined up on the edge and he allowed for George Karlaftis and Mike Dana to get a quarterback sack shared on Trevor Lawrence. And Chris Jones isn't going to show up in the stat line for that, but he created that opportunity for those guys to get in there and bring down Trevor Lawrence. So he was all over the place, and you could tell extra motivation for Chris Jones. You could tell making up for lost time for Chris Jones. You could tell all of that, ready, hungry. And I was questioning when we found out that he was going to be activated and ready to go for this game. I was wondering how game speed ready he would actually be. And I thought that he could come in and make an impact, but I didn't know if they would have him on a pitch count. I didn't know. And, there were even reports leading up to the game that the Chiefs were mainly going to use him in passing down situations, in critical plays, that sort of thing. They didn't. I mean, they used him basically the entire game, and he made an impact from start to finish. And so you add him in there. He looks conditioned and ready to go. You add him into a unit that through the first two games has looked even really good without Chris Jones, with Karlaftis and Dan and the secondary looking pretty solid. This could be a better than we expected Chiefs defense. Like, I mean, we could maybe be talking about a Chiefs defense, sure, like maybe in the top 5 in the NFL. Like, they looked outstanding yesterday versus Jacksonville. And even without Chris Jones a week ago in the loss against Detroit, they looked really good. So you add Chris Jones back in, man, the sky's the limit for this defense.
It is. And, Jones brings it all together. He lets everybody else be more successful. That's what, that's what defensive tackles do, right? They're in the middle of everything always. Pressure up the middle is unbeatable. It's the most valuable thing, I think, to a defense. So we got, I believe, good news on both Bolton and Gay. I think that they're both okay because they're two really important players. Obviously, the secondaries look good. And look, and you got to imagine too, like, whatever Felix Anudike-Uzomah gives them at whatever point this year is going to be even more of a bonus. That defense is going to be good. And that's good because the offense is going along much more slowly. And they're going to, early on in the season, probably need that defense. I don't know, Tommy, that all of a sudden the offense is just going to explode here. I think by the, it's almost like the bizarro Chiefs, right? Normally, the offense comes out of the gates and the Chiefs are able to just outscore everybody. And then by the end of the year, the defense sort of settles in as a middle of the road defense in the NFL. We may see the opposite this year, where we have a more elite defense as the offense comes along. Now, the offense, again, this is the headline today, and I'll ask you first because I'm not that concerned about the offense through 2 games. I mean, I have some concern. I don't even know if I'd call it concern, but there will be people that are concerned because they only scored 17 points here. Where do you fall with that?
Well, here's where I land on where this offense is through 2 weeks. I am a little bit concerned, not about Patrick Mahomes, because we know he's great, but what concerned me after yesterday's game with the Jaguars, they had a really hard time getting into a rhythm, basically from start to finish. And honestly, I think a lot of that stems from just an overall reluctance to run the football. It was really, really difficult for Kansas City to call a running play at all. I mean, I thought that Patrick Mahomes was going to throw 100 times in that game. And I understand that should be the strength of the team. I mean, when you've got Patrick Mahomes, it should be, right? But really early on, they didn't go to Isaiah Pacheco. They didn't go to Jerick McKinnon. They didn't go to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, they didn't run the ball at all. And so when that happens and you don't have even any semblance of balance in your play calling, you're going to become predictable, and the defense is going to be able to lock down on, passing because they know that's all you're going to do. That's all you're comfortable doing. That's all you're interested in doing. And when you've got a wide receiver core as young and as unproven as Kansas City's, if you become predictable and the defense knows that it's basically always going to be a passing down for you, then they can lock down on that, right? Like, they don't have to sell out to the run whatsoever. And so you've got defenders in the secondary for Jacksonville. They say, hey, we don't have to worry about Kansas City running the ball. Like we just can lock down on Kadarius Toney and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Sky Moore and others and make Patrick Mahomes beat us with his arm. And they had a really hard time moving the football because of the reluctance to run the ball.
They are looking better running the ball. I never know what to make of that for the Chiefs because they don't do it a lot, right? Like Isaiah Pacheco, I don't think if he carried it 20 times is going to average, whatever it was, 5 yards carry, 5.5 yards a carry.
But he didn't even really start to get carries in the game until late, like in the second half. Like they could never get it established in the first half.
And look, I think people are wasting their breath trying to tell Andy Reid to run the ball. Okay. Like it's not going to happen at a high clip. Now, as this offense develops this year, could it happen more? Probably early. But the problem for the Chiefs, Tommy, are mistakes and turnovers through 2 games. Like, let's be real. Was it 3 turnovers? Maybe almost 4 if Toney doesn't recover his own fumble.
Right.
So you've got that issue coming. You've got a penalty game, which is just like absurd. Jawan Taylor got benched, rightfully so. He was awful. But those are things that I don't think are long lasting. And so I think there will be a lot of different things happening all at once offensively. The receivers, I thought, played much better this week than they did a week ago. Travis Kelce, Jacksonville did a good job on Kelce. Sky Moore had a couple of big plays. Kadarius Toney, you can sort of see it, right, why they like him so much. So you had things there that make you feel a little bit. Jerick McKinnon had a few catches. Like I thought that, between weeks 1 and 2, the receiving group was, 1,000 times better. So that's good. Turnovers and mistakes are going to kill any team offensively. You take those away and it's probably a very different outcome too. So, between the penalties and those sorts of things, I think that I felt okay about it. I think they probably need to run it a little bit more this year, but we've talked about it. They don't have a lot of depth there, Tommy. Like I also don't want to expose them if something happened to Pacheco because he's the only one of that group I feel good about running the ball. I certainly don't about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So there is a little bit of that going on too.
And I get the style of running from Isaiah Pacheco. You saw it on full display the few times he got to carry the ball yesterday. I mean, just that powerful running ability. And that does set you up for a lack of durability. I mean, that just that's kind of the risk that you run when you've got a guy like Isaiah Pacheco and you're handing him the ball. That being said, he was extremely effective when he did run the football. And so, it's kind of that, that dilemma. Do you continue to give him the ball and run that risk? Or, do you say, well, we're just going to, kind of complement the passing game with him? And I agree with you. And you've said it before that Isaiah Pacheco is not a bell cow running back. He's just not. The style of running, he's just not. And that's okay.
He'll get hurt.
You can still utilize him, I think, in a better way than what the Chiefs did, especially in that first half. As far as the turnovers are concerned, I mean, it's kind of like deja vu, just with a different player, with Richie James fumbling a punt yesterday. Now, fortunate for the Chiefs defense that they were so good that they limited Jacksonville to just a field goal. But man, if we could just it's like rinse and repeat from a year ago. I thought that we had kind of gotten away from the whole muffing a punt, and you could tell that ball, James lost it in the sun, couldn't see it at all. It hit him in the face mask. Just get out of the way. If you lose it in the sun, leave the area entirely and let it hit the ground, because you gifted Jacksonville with fantastic field position. Again, the defense bailed out Richie James in that regard, but they got to get those turnovers figured out. I know Patrick Mahomes had an interception, just, kind of difficult to get on a rhythm. You felt like, okay, the defense is doing their job. They give the ball back to the offense, and then the offense stalls out or there's a turnover. It was difficult to see any kind of long-term, really sustained drives that ended in success for Kansas City.
Let's talk more about the offense. We'll take a quick break here. More about the offense and more bigger picture, because let's remember, that was a win on the road against a team that's going to be in contention, we think, for the top seed in the AFC. We'll get to that. We'll hear from Patrick Mahomes. We'll hear from Andy Reid after the game. Of course, you hear all the Chiefs games right here on the Chiefs Radio Network, our family of stations. with us here over on KNSS. By the way, you got Monday Night Football here tonight for us, and we always carry these Monday Night Football games. It's that we're going to have the Cleveland-Pittsburgh portion of Monday Night Football tonight, and you can catch all of the NFL on Westwood One. The NFL's back. Primetime games available free from Westwood One, live on the Odyssey app. You can listen to the games right here on KFH. You can also download the Odyssey app, listen to it wherever you are. Just search for KFH at kickoff on that free Odyssey app. Tommy and I will be back. We'll have more Sports Daily right after this.
3-0 Jacksonville. Kansas City, first down and goal to go at the 9. Mahomes coming to the near side. Pass is caught by Sky Moore. Touchdown! Kansas City! Sky Moore, his first regular season touchdown of his career. 11:42 to go, third quarter. Single back McKinnon. In front of Mahomes this time. Snap back to Mahomes. Rolls to his right side. Now throws it for Kelsey, wide open in the end zone. Touchdown! Kansas City, the 47th time that Patrick Mahomes has found Travis Kelsey in the sweet nectar of the end zone. That's an all-time Kansas City Chiefs record, quarterback to a pass catcher.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you. It was good to see Travis Kelsey back. Good to see him get into the end zone. Ian Eagle on the TV broadcast said he found a blank space, which was funny. It's Taylor Swift reference. And then you had Sky Moore, Tommy. I thought Sky Moore on that touchdown, that was a really impressive play. Good to see him bounce back. Still plenty of room to go for him, I think, to achieve what he needs to be for this team, but certainly a better game for him than we saw in that first week. Could be as simple as, he's going to be a better fit as the second option in this offense. I think that's probably has something to do with it, but the nice game for him. Kadarius Toney made some plays, right? Caught the ball and shows you his run after the catch ability, which is what the Chiefs like about him. So, I thought progress there with the wide receiving group. I think still a whole lot of, progress to be made. But again, I thought just so much better than we saw in week one.
Yeah, outside of Sky Moore, I felt like the best wide receiver was probably Rashee Rice. I liked watching, some of the catches that he made in the course of that game, and I really want to see him get more involved offensively as the weeks go on. The Chiefs feel pretty solid with him, and of course they take him in the second round, want to see him develop. And then let's not forget about Justin Watson. I know that Justin Watson, isn't very highly thought of. I know he had a fumble, right? And it was an unfortunate fumble that he had, and you cannot have that at all. But there clearly is a trust factor that Patrick Mahomes has with Justin Watson, kind of like a safety valve type situation where, there were, and I feel like he gets forgotten by the fan base quite a bit when it comes to the wide receivers. Everybody wants to talk about the guys with the high ceilings and the Sky Moores of the world and the Rashee Rices of the world and others. And I get all of that. I totally understand that. There clearly is a connection there, and there has been for quite some time with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Watson. You cannot have the fumble. You absolutely cannot do that. You got to go down right away, and make sure that you're not getting the ball punched out. But I think that it's time for everybody to start to really look at this connection that Patrick Mahomes has with Justin Watson.
Yeah, look, I like Justin Watson. I don't want Justin Watson with like 8 targets a game. I think he is handy to have around. And he's earned this right. Love him as a player. He's all the things we like, but I don't want him to be one of the featured guys in the offense because I think the offense is better with some of these other guys. I'm glad he's there though. And the fumble, you can't do that. It's a good play defensively.
Yeah.
I'm fine with Watson. I'm glad he's there again, but they need Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, Travis Kelsey, Rashee Rice. Those need to be the guys because they're dynamic playmakers. They were drafted high for a reason, and you need some combination of that. It's coming along probably more slowly than I thought. I don't know what to make because it's way too early. So the reality is, Tommy, Travis Kelsey didn't play in the first game. It's his first game back from injury. I assume he's healthy. I don't know how healthy. It's too early, I think, to have any overall concerns. It's certainly not where we'd like it to be, but let's talk in a couple of weeks, right? And see where that is before we start trying to I just don't know. And I'm having a hard time. I certainly feel better than I did last week, but I'm not all the way there yet with this group. And so let's just see how, they play Chicago this week, right? So the Chiefs are 12.5-point favorites. Massive favorites against Chicago, and we'll get a really good chance, I guess, to, see what they should do to a bad team now. And it'll be an interesting challenge for the defense with the way Fields can run around, but Fields doesn't look good at all. I think that this will be the week, Tommy, where we probably need to get a better look. Like, there's no reason the Chiefs shouldn't move the ball at will. There's no reason we shouldn't see big plays by the receivers in this game. It's very different this week than it was either against Detroit or Jacksonville for about 1,000 different reasons. This is the week we need to see them flex a little bit. And so I'll give that time to happen, right? Like, I think that they're going to be okay long term. Let's go to some audio post game and see what we think from both Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. I don't think, with those two voices that we've heard, I need to tell you which one's which, but here's Mahomes and Andy Reid after the game.
Yeah, no, just kind of getting to a check there on the first touchdown to Sky, kind of in our 2-minute, getting to the right play. Sky running a great route, making a great play against, what a great corner, honestly. And so just going to the matchup on that one. And then the second one, it's just kind of me and Trav, just kind of doing the scramble drill, working. And Travis, that's what he's great at that stuff. And so we were able to find him. Wish I would have been able to find him in the third one that I missed him in that corner of the end zone. But like I said, just stuff that we have to get better at, little things. But little things in this league make a big difference, and we have to continue to get better at that stuff.
Well, my biggest thing I take away is I thought our defense did a nice job. So, and then the offense battled through it and so on. But you had the elements. We all felt it. All you guys felt it. So you have the elements that you got to fight through. And, you're not walking in the park here. It's both teams are battling through some heat and humidity.
That was, heat and humidity was a factor for sure. I mean, it was hot, but they're not that far removed, Tommy, from training camp. So I don't like that excuse too much at this time of the year. If you get a random hot one in like November but training camp in hot, humid St. Joe was not that long ago. I think that's why they do that hot and humid training camp in St. Joe, like for games exactly like that in Jacksonville, to have that conditioning to be able to do that. I mean, that's why Andy Reid has a grueling training camp, is to be able to survive games in Jacksonville in mid-September. I mean, that's the reason why. So the question for me becomes, like, what is the ceiling for this offense? And that's what I'm having a hard time trying to like come up with internally. Like, what is the ceiling for this offense? Because you look at it, and the ceiling to me is not like the ceiling of a Tyreek Hill offense. Is it the ceiling of last year? Yeah, I mean, I think it for sure is the ceiling of last year. And I think that that's totally fine. It may take a little while to get there. Defenses are doing something that just have the Chiefs a little bit uncomfortable, because like in week 1, it was like, they dropped all these passes, outside of penalties, but on the offensive line and stuff, there wasn't anything to really slow down the offense yesterday, if that makes any sense. Like, it wasn't like the drops are the drops. Like, it's right there in front of you. Like, God. The penalties are a little bit different than that. It's mistakes one way or the other. We just, a more mistake-free game would be nice to see, and I think that'll help us try to determine what the ceiling for this offense is. But I don't know if it's as high as it has been in the last 5 years, and it's probably okay.
I don't think it is. I think that they can grow to that point, but especially right now, it's not. In week 1, there were a clear number of mistakes as far as the drops. In week 2, there were a clear number of mistakes with the penalties, and then just also it looked like there were, some plays that didn't develop the way that Kansas City wanted them to. And then it goes back to what I said before, the mismatch as far as running the football versus passing the football. Isaiah Pacheco had 12 carries for 70 yards. The lion's share of those carries came late in the game. It came when the Chiefs were trying to bleed the clock and, trying to, basically seal the victory away. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 1 carry. Jerick McKinnon had 1 carry. That was basically it. I mean, Isaiah Pacheco didn't really carry the ball much at all in the first half. But then you look at the passing game, and Patrick Mahomes targeted 11 different receivers. To me, that shows that you really don't have a great handle on exactly who the go-to guy is going to be. You mentioned, and I know it's Travis Kelce, right? But you mentioned the ceiling of this offense not being a Tyreek Hill type offense. And you're right. And the reason for that is because there's not a talent like Tyreek Hill. There's not a go-to guy like Tyreek Hill. Can Sky Moore be that guy eventually? Maybe. Can Kadarius Toney be that guy? Probably not. I think he might have flashes of some brilliance from time to time, but I'm not sure he's going to be the go-to guy. And really right now through 2 weeks, we're seeing Patrick Mahomes distribute the ball out to a ton of different people in hopes that, somebody can make an impact. You've got Noah Gray, and I thought Noah Gray had a good game in week 1 in relief of Travis Kelce, who didn't play. And then I thought he had a pretty decent game yesterday also, but you just don't have a really great handle on one or two guys that you're going to go after. Now, you contrast that with the Jags. You knew that Calvin Ridley was going to be targeted, and you also knew that it was going to be really difficult for the Chiefs secondary to hang with him. And, Ridley made some catches that were outstanding yesterday. There really isn't that kind of talent to catch the football for Kansas City right now. And so because of that, you see 11 different guys getting targets from Patrick Mahomes.
Well, I think we saw it last year too. We see it because defenses are taking away the deep ball from the Chiefs. They've been doing that now since the Bucs beat them in the Super Bowl. And, remember that even with Tyreek Hill, teams were doing that. So they're not allowing that, that is how clearly, and by the way, now that's pretty much the way the league plays everybody. So it's still, offenses have been behind for, it feels like about 14 or 15 months. And this adjustment, right? It just hasn't been as explosive. And that's the way defenses have decided to play. And I keep waiting for this like trend to sway back to teams just pounding the rock to try and counter that a little bit, but they're not yet. I think that this team is always going to spread it around that way. I think that's totally fine, by the way, because I do think they have potentially, they have obviously the best tight end in football, maybe of all time. So that's just sort of put that aside. They don't have any A receivers right now.
No.
They probably have, though, 3 potentially, B probably ceiling type guys playing at a
they're
C
not playing
plus
at a B
B
right
minus level,
you've got a bunch of C receivers right now at best.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I agree, but that can elevate, I'm saying, at a ceiling to be, 3 probably B receivers between Tony and Sky Moore and Rashee Rice. And it's too early for Rashee Rice to make any sort of statement like that. But, at this point, can 2 of those guys sort of step up into that, reliable? And the other thing is too, like I'm also beginning to think, I don't know that there's ever going to be anybody targeted more than 5 or 6 times in a game. That's just the way they want to run their offense. And that's okay
outside
too.
Of Travis Kelce, right? Kelce had 9 targets yesterday.
Travis Kelce's an outlier. Yeah. Travis Kelce, by the way, needs to be targeted that much in my opinion, just to sort of take the pressure off of everybody else. Like that's the thing. Like if those guys can just continuously get single coverage and make plays like Sky Moore made on his touchdown where he just flat beats his corner, great. You need like 3 or 4 players. You just got to do that a few times a game and things go well. The problem is, Tommy, like we want to say this XYZ about the offense, but we had drops galore in game 1 and penalties galore in game 2. So I still don't think we're seeing a fair representation of what the offense is going to be. We've had 2 massive mistake games, right? What do they look like when they don't play a massive mistake game?
But that's the question. Can they do that? They haven't done that for 2 weeks. So, and you've got
all the penalties. The penalties weren't as much their problem this week, right? There were a lot
some of them
offensive.
were. The thing is, everybody was looking at Juwan Taylor after week number 1, and there should have been, and there might have been, but there should have been conversation with Juwan Taylor leading into this game about, hey, they're going to be looking out for you. Like they're going to be checking you out with a microscope, and they're going to call penalties on you left and right. And he really didn't adjust much, got the penalties called on him, got pulled for a brief period of time, then got back in there. But, some of that stuff is self-inflicted. Now, there were some calls that were not good, some penalties that I disagree with, just like there is in every single game. But, eventually, and this is what the Chiefs have to avoid, they have to avoid these mistake games that we've seen in both games to start the season. You have to avoid that becoming the norm. Like that's got to be the exception, not the rule. Now, I will say from an optimist point of view, Now's the time, the next 6 games, now's the time for Kansas City to really try to get right. The next 6 games they play, their opponents currently in those 6 games are combined 1-11. And the one win comes from the Zach Wilson-led Jets in week number 1 against the Bills. Every other team they play, the Bears, the Vikings, the Broncos, the Chargers, the Broncos again, none of them have won. Like, none of them have. So you've got the opportunity now to be able, with a schedule against teams that are struggling right now over the next 6 weeks, to really try to get right, get into a rhythm with your offense. I feel supremely confident about the defense right now, so I'm not even concerned about that. But you got to get right offensively, because, once you get through these next 6 games in the next month and a half, you go overseas. You play the Dolphins overseas. And then at that point, you're playing the Eagles, and it's a Super Bowl rematch. So you've got a little bit of time to get right, especially when you're playing the Bears and the Jets in the next 2 weeks. But it's becoming that time where you've got to make sure that these mistakes that you've had in the first 2 games, they don't continue on.
Certainly. And I don't think that they will. Andy Reid's had penalized teams. Let's be real. Like, there've been plenty of Chiefs games where the Chiefs have too many penalties. There's so many formational things. They are so, they do all these confusing things. So that's not unusual to have penalties. The drops were unusual. The penalties aren't that unusual. So many of them were very silly. The turnovers bug me more than the penalties, I think. They both bug me, but I think the turnovers bug me more. I never envisioned Richie James fumbling a punt. Now, you mentioned the Sun. Hopefully that's an outlier and we don't have a Sky Moore situation where it gets into his head. That's why Richie James is here. So I think that's probably okay.
And I'm not sure they have anybody else to return punts, by the way. I mean,
I wouldn't want anybody else back there.
You've got Kadarius Toney, you've got Sky Moore, but I don't really want either one of them returning punts.
I don't need. I mean, I'd probably put Justin Watson back there and just say catch the ball. Just catch the ball, or don't catch the ball, but fair catch or let it go. That's it. That's all we want, because we can't take that risk. If it's a big high leverage spot, we'll put Kadarius Toney back there.
I mean, because that's honestly become the bugaboo, I think, for Kansas City from last season into this year so far. Like, you can't have that continue with all the special teams woes they had a year ago. That
especially if the defense is really good, because they're going to need to field a lot of punts. And the thing is, again, like Richie James, I don't think that's going to be that's why I'm glad they kept him on the roster. So we'll see. I think it's probably one-off, but you never would have thought Sky Moore would have happened last year the way it did too. But the defense is going to make the other team punt this much. It becomes certainly something to watch, because you get into these games where you very clearly outplay your opponents. I mean, the Chiefs, by every metric, outplayed Jacksonville yesterday, and it was a 1-score game. Why? Because they let them hang around. Why? Because they turned the dang ball over, and because they had penalties to kill themselves and shoot themselves in the foot. Those are correctable things. We'll see. Young team, a lot of room to go. A lot of other things they've got to get done. We'll come back. We'll hit the rest of the NFL. We'll get to some college football reactions coming up in the next hour. Let's start, Tommy, let's start our giveaways with some HTO and hockey tickets. We'll pair these up. So we've got hockey tickets for you. This is for the Wichita Thunder home opener against the Kansas City Mavericks, October 20th. It will be here before we know it. So we'll have a pair of tickets to that, October 20th, 7 o'clock at Intrust Bank Arena, the Thunder home opener. We'll throw in a pair of HTO free iced tea cards, which are now available at the 2 Wichita locations, East and West, and in Derby. They opened up. Went in there and checked out our friends last night. They're doing great. So those free tea cards available for you at any of those 3 locations. Good luck to everybody. First caller, Jad, will get us a winner during the break, 869-1240 on the IHOP hotline. We'll come back, react to the rest of the NFL next. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. Making our way through. Congratulations to Mike for getting some HTO, Wichita East, West, and now in Derby, and for winning home opener tickets. Can't believe that's already coming up to the Wichita Thunder at Intrust Bank Arena there in October. We'll have more giveaways coming up in the second hour. Let's look around the rest of the NFL, Tommy. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor here, Jad Chambers producing. I think that, the NFC East and the AFC East both look good. It's too bad about the Jets, but man, the Cowboys hung 30 on that defense. That was pretty wild. Washington with their crazy finish. The NFC East only has one loss collectively. Tommy, the AFC West, I don't know, man. The Chargers found another way to lose. There's a lot happening in the NFL. The Falcons are 2-0. Like it's wild and crazy. And boy, it's what makes it fun. It is impossible to predict it.
Yeah, you mentioned the NFC East, and clearly the Cowboys have looked dominant. The Eagles haven't looked quite as much like world beaters as I thought they would through the first two games, but they're still 2-0. The Giants were on the brink of disaster after the home opener in week number 1 against the Cowboys, and then getting blown out 40-0. And then they had a terrible first half against the Cardinals. An incredible comeback, though, to move to 1-1, although Saquon Barkley got injured. The Commanders with a big comeback against the Broncos. The Broncos like collapsing in the second half at home. So that wasn't good at all. But really, and you kind of touched on it, I'm really interested about the NFC South. You mentioned the Falcons. They're 2-0. How about the Buccaneers with Baker Mayfield 2-0? And then you've got a divisional matchup tonight with the Panthers and the Saints. That might be a sneaky, talented division right there in the NFC South. And you know what? People have given Baker Mayfield so much grief over the last couple of years, and I've never really understood it. I mean, he's kind of resurrected his career. I feel like when he went to LA last year,
injury, he's
and
been
now,
really bad.
But I get it. But he's kind of brought things back a little bit, and now he's leading a Buccaneers team. And of course, the Buccaneers are talented in other areas. But man, he's looked really good through the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I root for Baker Mayfield, Big 12 guy. I want him to succeed, and I thought it was a raw deal in Cleveland after he tried to play through injury for them. I'm very happy for Baker Mayfield. I don't think that division's like all of a sudden really good. I think they've had the benefit of some advantageous scheduling. Although I will say, and look, the Packers covered, and I loved the Packers this week as a bet, and all of that was fine. I'm impressed that the Falcons came back and won that game.
Yeah,
right. They were up. They scored 13 fourth quarter points to come back and win. And Desmond Ridder at times has looked like the worst starting quarterback in football, but he was actually, pretty good. They ran him 10 times. We don't need to spend a ton of time on the Falcons, other than to say Bijan Robinson is a stud. So we've got the two Big 12 running backs. You remember Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall was there, and Deuce Vaughn. Like the Big 12 at one point had all three of those guys running wild. And I'm watching Bijan Robinson, and I'm thinking, boy, there was a time where you could have made a case he was the third best running back in the Big 12. Right. Why on earth did the Jets only give Breece Hall 4 carries? I saw that, and I was in and out of that game. We were running around doing stuff. And so I'm watching it, and it's getting out of hand. I'm like, okay, it's okay that I'm missing this because I'm a Cowboys fan. But then I go back and look, and I'm like, Breece Hall 4 carries. As I'm checking like fantasy scores, I'm like, oh no, did he get hurt? And then I see there's a little drama afterward as he's like tweeting 4 footballs, and his quote basically was, "We struggled because I didn't get the ball." Now, there was context added to that, so don't let that headline fool you. He just said the game got away from us, and it's hard to run the ball, and that that throws everything off. But the headline's going to say Breece Hall's disgruntled and all this stuff, and Sauce Gardner was unhappy after the game.
Dalvin Cook fumbled also in the game. I mean, the thing about the Jets is that they've got to, if they want to be successful at any level with the personnel they have right now and Zach Wilson at quarterback, they can't play from behind. They can't play from behind. You've got to establish the run early. You've got to lean on the defense. You've got to let Breece Hall do his thing, but you can't play from behind and expect Zach Wilson to throw the ball 30 times and have any chance to win the football game. Like that's never going to happen for this team. And so if they can't do that, then their season is done. And I was fairly optimistic that if they did things the right way, if they ran the football early, if they leaned on if they did all those things, they'd be okay. And I have a hard time thinking, I know that they played the Cowboys, but I've got a hard time thinking that they're ever going to be able to play from ahead to be able to establish that run and lean on it with Breece Hall.
Not unless their defense locks you down. And that brings you, 2 points. Over under number of games Zach Wilson remains the starter. He is awful. I'm going to say
2 more, 3 more,
maybe 1 more, maybe 0 more. But the Cowboys, the Cowboys probably are the most impressive team through 2 games. And they
I'd agree with
get
that.
another cupcake next week. So again, I kind of got to see him play somebody really good to be overly optimistic, but I am impressed by the way they played against that defense. That was something. And look, I hope I eat crow on Mike McCarthy and this works out swimmingly. I do.
Couple other quick NFL notes. I know that hopefully we'll have more time next hour to touch on these things, but maybe the Lions aren't as good as we thought they were, falling to the Seahawks. The Bills looked impressive against the Raiders, and I'm starting to get concerned about Joe Burrow and what's going on in Cincinnati.
While we take this break, go look at Joe Burrow through the first 2 games of the last 3 years. I'm concerned about his calf injury. We'll talk. Let's talk about the state of things because, this is concerning for Cincinnati, but this has happened to them the last 3 years. Like I think he's like 1-5 or something like that. Look at the first 2 games of his career. It's like 1-7 overall. So it's crazy how slow Cincinnati has started historically. But we'll come back. We will talk about the state of the NFL, sort of power rank it a little bit because obviously that concerns the Chiefs. But when we come back, we'll start the next hour with some college football talk. KU, K-State on the way out. Let's give away some comedy tickets, Jad. Comedian Bert Kreischer bringing his Tops Off World Tour to Wichita's Intrust Bank Arena. The show is this Friday, September 22nd, 7 o'clock. He was named the 2023 Stand-Up Comedian of the Year at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival in Montreal. We'll give you a pair of tickets to our second caller on the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. We'll come back. College football talk next on Sports Daily.
Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
It's that time, Sports Daily, getting all the inside information on the Kansas Jayhawks. Let's go now to the KU football and basketball beat writer from the Kansas City Star, Shreyas Latta.
All right, welcome back into Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, Shreyas Latta joining us again this week, our KU insider. Looking forward to that. And Shreyas, it was, probably not the performance we wanted there against Nevada, but a win is a win is a win, especially when it comes on the road for the first time in the year. Bird's eye view, what did you think on Saturday?
I mean, to be honest with you, like you said, a win is a win. And that's kind of what the mood was like in the locker room. Yeah, I expected them to win by more. And yeah, they probably should have. But, there's a lot of things that didn't go their way that game, and they came out with a victory. I think last year, or even, really dating back to the last decade, that's the kind of game Kansas would lose. That's the kind of game that would deflate a locker room. But, they're coming out of there 3-0, first time, 2 consecutive 3-0 starts since 1991-1992 season, which is big. Tells you how much the culture shift in Kansas has happened. And winning a game ugly like that against an opponent that they probably should have beat a little more. I think Devin Neal said it best. It really prepares them for Big 12 play, which is going to be a grind.
Just looking at Jalen Daniels' stat line, 21 of 28, 298 yards passing. And I felt like while that's a fairly efficient performance, there were some throws that Daniels forced a little bit. Some that very nearly could have ended up in disaster for the Jayhawks. But that being said, though, he still threw for a good amount of yards. Still a really good stat line overall as far as yardage. What'd you take away from Jalen Daniels' performance on Saturday?
I mean, I thought it was a pretty performance for how good Jalen is, and he still put up nearly 300 yards. So it kind of tells you how good of a quarterback he is. And Kansas Jayhawks fans are lucky to have that caliber of talent in Lawrence. I remember talking to his parents afterwards, and I was like, he didn't really put together a great first half. And, but the second half, he was accurate. He didn't hold on the ball too long. He wasn't doing too many home run balls, and he played his game, I think, and it showed. If you can come out of a game with just, having 300 yards passing and obviously it could have had a couple more touchdowns there, but they ran on the ball. That just tells you that how good he is. That's the baseline for a Jalen Daniels game nowadays is 250 plus with a chance for a couple touchdowns. And that's pretty special.
Shreya, it was funny. I was looking, I think like a Devin Neal touchdown, one touchdown in the game was like minus 600 on the betting line. Like it's so clear how Kansas wants to utilize him. I am curious though, 17 carries for him. And then Highshaw had 9. I think maybe I anticipated that being a little closer to 50-50, but right now, boy, it sure does look like Neal is the featured guy. Do you think that's going to continue? Or do you think we will see a more even load in a long season with Highshaw and Neal there? Maybe even McDuffie a little bit.
I think it maybe evens out a little bit. I know Neal came in a little bit, banged up. There's injury concerns there. And Highshaw, looked a lot better the last couple of weeks than he did, I think, week 1, where he looked a step slow coming back from recovery. But I think it'll even out a little bit, but it's clear that Devin is an excellent running back, and it's a guy that will probably be drafted if he declares this year in the NFL draft. He's been great, and he's averaging a very high yards per carry. He nearly broke over 100 yards again this game. It seems like anytime he gets the ball, he's going to get you like 5 yards, and that's a great spot to be in with Jalen's overall game, and then you have the nice complementary piece in Highshaw. But I expect him to kind of be the lead and featured back, but because he just seems like he's won that job ever since he took it over from Highshaw last year.
Taking a look at the defense in this game on Saturday, Shreya, I'm not sure, and maybe you've seen this before, but I'm not sure I've seen a team fumble the ball so many times that, like Nevada did, and Kansas not have an opportunity to recover any of them. Now, that being said, the defense, I felt like really kept KU in the game, had some big stops and all of that. But what was your overall takeaway from the defensive effort?
I mean, I think it's the same thing. They're a really good defense, improved from last year. The biggest issue that keeps on popping up to me is the inability to stop QB contain, stop QBs from scrambling. They give up 63 yards on the ground to Brendan Lewis, the Nevada QB. The week before that, they had a 72-yard touchdown where Luke Altmaier from Illinois went untouched. It seems like they're doing an excellent job really forcing QBs to, not really do anything in the passing game. Opposing teams are averaging only 150 yards in the air. And Lewis had, I think, 113, 115. He had 89 going into that final drive or two. So they've done a great job limiting there. It just seems like obviously it was a little bit of bad luck, and I think a little bit of, lackadaisicalness to not get any of those fumbles, a mix of both of those things. But the only thing that really worries me if I was a Kansas fan, and just looking objectively from everything at all angles, is that inability to contain, QBs on the run. And I was just looking at BYU's QB. He's averaged -2 yards for the year on the run in, passing, rushing yards. So I think Kansas defense should be able to do a good job against him. But, they look much improved from last year. I think that's huge.
We look at Kansas, who's 3-0, and you take that one of those wins against a Big Ten opponent. They get to come back home. You don't want to look ahead at Texas. The Big 12's down. Shreya Lotta joining us here, KU beat writer for the KC Star. Big 12's down. Like what do we need to readjust our ceiling potentially to where KU could finish in this league? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but I've been high on KU since the season started. So now it just makes me a little higher on KU, because you're looking at an opportunity where the games that they were maybe 50-50 look like they're leaning 70-30 or 60-40 in KU's way. Like they should 100% beat Iowa State. They should beat Oklahoma State, who had a bad loss to South Alabama this past weekend. Did look like they could beat Texas Tech. The OU game was my upset pick. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. They should beat Cincinnati. So instead of going maybe 500 conference play or 5-4 or whatever, you're looking at maybe a differential of something like 6-3. Even better than that. I think the possibility of 9 wins, even 10 potentially, is really there. And they could finish top 3 in the conference. I really do think it could be something like Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, or Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, or Texas, Kansas, Kansas State, something like that. I really don't think there's a clear-cut team right now from what I've seen in the conference that I feel super confident in after Texas. I think OU is good, but I don't think the competition they've played is great. And I'm curious to see how they play in Lawrence this year. But, this is the kind of year that, you want Kansas to go out there and turn some heads and compete for maybe a Big 12 title and get a nice, kind of showcase for all the guys that they've signed up for the class of 2024. And, a guy like Malcolm Bogandowski who's picking between basically K-State and Kansas and potentially USC. That plays, I think, a big factor in recruiting to have a season where they might, be contending for a Big 12 title.
How about BYU, Sharius? That's the next game on the schedule for the Jayhawks back at home this Saturday. BYU went into Arkansas and beat the Razorbacks on Saturday. BYU avenging that loss a year ago against the Razorbacks, and now they come to Lawrence. BYU is also 3-0. What are you looking forward to with this game? What's it going to take for the Jayhawks to beat them? I know that right now, I was kind of surprised with where the line is. It looks like the Jayhawks are somewhere around touchdown favorites right now. So what's your takeaway on this game coming up, and what's it going to take for the Jayhawks to move to 4-0?
Yeah, I think the big thing is the BYU defense is pretty good. The issue with BYU is the fact that their running game isn't as good as Kansas is. They only average about, I think, 78 yards on the ground with an average of 2.7 yards per carry, which is not great. They have a pretty good quarterback in Kendon Slovis, and he's had a good year, 6 touchdowns, 1 reception, over 600 yards passing. The issue with him for a defense like Kansas is he cannot run the ball. He's put up -2 yards between 3 games in the running game. So that bodes well for a defense that struggles against QBs that can scramble and they're dual threats. So I really like Kansas in this one. I understand why the line is so high, and I understand why people are a little apprehensive after the Nevada game. But you need games like Nevada to really make you in tune and focus for a conference opener. And Big 12 first time ever game for BYU. It's an ESPN game, the third one in the Lance Leipold era. Just a lot of things I think that could really play in the favor of Kansas. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if they win by more than a touchdown or 2.
All right, Sharius, let's switch gears a little bit. You report on both football and basketball, a big basketball story. You had extensive reporting on Arterio Morris suspended from the team. Where do things stand right now? We can go back and look at it, but just for the latest on a Monday, is he done, or is it a temporary suspension at this point?
I don't want to speculate on all that. We're still doing the reporting and looking into it all. All I know is the Lawrence County DA's office has gotten the case details and looking into it all. So we'll see what happens, whether they press charges or whatever. But at this moment, I don't want to speculate. I don't think it's my place to say at this point in time.
So as far as that story goes, Sharius, we know that Arterio Morris had an open assault charge on him when he came to the Jayhawks program. And, that was something that I know the program and Bill Self released a statement saying that they felt comfortable with Arterio Morris coming to the program, coming to Lawrence. He had been practicing with the team, during this time. What's from your perspective and from where you've been reporting, any thoughts on any questions about Arterio Morris based on the previous allegation that I know there was reporting earlier, like last week, about that being pled down and all of that, the case being closed. Now you have this allegation. Where does that stand as far as, the thought process of bringing him on to the program in the first place?
So from what I've heard, they did an extensive research. They really did their due diligence and all that. And interestingly, the timing of being it pled down was a little interesting because it was the day before my article came out. So obviously I'm not going to speculate on that, but I'll let people fill in the blanks a little bit there. But it's I think it's definitely interesting, and Kansas did its job in making sure that when he was being, kind of like when this stuff kind of happened, they've done their due diligence and suspended him and let the due process and legal system play out with whatever it needs to play out in. It's interesting to see what will happen. And I'd like to reiterate, I just don't want to speculate because there's just so many moving parts with this case. And it's such a delicate subject matter that right now, whatever I put down in my writing is something I kind of want to stick to and reiterate. And I urge anybody to read the Kansas City Star article because I think it would not be fair of me to speculate, and I don't think it would be, wise of me to speculate either.
Yeah, look, Trias, we appreciate that. I work in another capacity in that world too, and that's absolutely the right way to go. People can read up on it at the Kansas City Star. Look, the reality is, though, there's a chance that he doesn't play for Kansas. Kansas is going to come into next season, I think, as number one or real close to it in just about everybody's top 25. If he doesn't, or if this lingers, if he's not there out of the gates, how much do you think that impacts that? Because the reality is it's been pretty clear that KU has liked what he showed them, through the summer and through the exhibitions and things like that. Are they still that prohibitive favorite without him? And what do you think that changes based on what we saw in exhibitions and things about how they may look next year?
Obviously, in the sense that if he's not playing or if something else happens, I don't, just looking at that, I think they're still favorites. They're still very uber talented. It probably clears up some guard minutes for guys like Marco Jackson, Nick Timberlake, to play a little more an increased role. A guy like Johnny Furphy might get some more minutes. I've heard great things about him, just in what he's showcased since he's come to Lawrence and, just what they liked about him coming in. So I think in a way, it creates some opportunities from other guys and an opportunity for some increased minutes. And obviously, withstanding with all this legal stuff that's been happening, Arterio was a very talented player, but let the due process for this case play out and everything that happened previously. So I think it'll be something to kind of watch and, figure out what'll happen because Kansas is in a situation where I think, they want everything to happen legally before they make too much of a drastic move or anything like that. And I think that's the smart way to kind of go about things in the sense of just let everything play out. And then I guess we'll figure out what happens on the basketball court after that.
So the suspension now, is as the legal process plays itself out. He hasn't been kicked off the team or anything like that, just so we can clear that up for people.
Not that I know of. No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, check out that article. A big story over the weekend. Trias had it at the KC Star about Arterio Morris in a little hot water potentially. A lot still to come, though, but you can see all the details up to this point in that article from Trias. Trias, I'm sure you'll have tons of stuff as well this week as we lead up to that BYU football game that people will be able to check out. Follow Trias on social media at SHRE98. Really good stuff again, man. Glad to have you on board with Sports Daily this week, and let's do it again next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. And I appreciate the time as always.
There goes Trias Latta. You can check out his work right now. You can follow him on social media. We appreciate that. KU, BYU coming up this weekend. Looking forward to that game quite a bit. So we'll have that. We'll come back. Let's take a break. That IHOP hotline will open back up, 869-1240. Congratulations to Larry, who won the Burt Kreischer tickets for later this week at Intrust Bank Arena. We'll talk a little K-State. Not as rosy. That's next on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. By the way, congratulations to Larry, who's going to see Bert Kreischer. I think I already said that. And Mike, our other ticket giveaway, Thunder home opener, HTO. So we'll have another giveaway coming up. We'll have some movie tickets for you to the Paw Patrol movie. So stay tuned for your chance to win those tickets as well. Tommy, let's talk about K-State. Dadgummit. Didn't get the win at Missouri. 61-yard game winner. Look, Missouri played much better than I thought they would. Give them credit. I could not figure out that line for the life of me. It was one of those that we just weren't seeing it straight. I mean, it's pretty clear, right? K-State was by the time the game started, just a very slight favorite in the game. We couldn't see it. K-State looked great. Missouri out to a rocky start, but clearly Missouri's better than we thought they were. I think it's probably more about them than it is about K-State, but I mean, I'm not going to shy away. That's a game K-State needed to win. Now they're 2-1. Doesn't affect them in the Big 12, but might affect them big picture if they reached their ceiling and can win the Big 12. That's a loss that you absolutely don't want to see.
I mean, it looked to me watching that game that it was Missouri playing lights out, playing like they were desperate to save their coach's job, the way that the play calling went, the way that they executed. To me, it seemed like, Eli Drinkwitz was coaching for his job potentially. I know that he's been on the hot seat. That wouldn't have been, great for Missouri having Kansas State, come into Columbia to have a bad loss like that. And then on the other hand, you had Kansas State, who looked kind of lethargic. I didn't really feel like they executed the way that they needed to. That being said, Kansas State hung in there for the majority of the game, but they should have pulled away early. And then it came down to, big time blunders at the end by Eli Drinkwitz and Missouri. Like, I felt like the Tigers, they had multiple opportunities to give that game away. And ultimately, Harrison Mevis, the kicker for Missouri, saved the Tigers and really pulled that game out for them with that 61-yarder, the longest field goal in SEC history. I mean, it was crazy. And, I felt like there were so many mistakes and blunders down the stretch, that final couple of drives for Missouri, and Kansas State just couldn't take advantage of it, unfortunately. That's a game that I feel like the Wildcats, they've got to look themselves in the mirror. They've got to say that was a winnable game. That was a game we should have won. And it was a game that we've got the better coach, we've got the better players, the better talent, but Missouri executed better at the end of the day.
For sure. Look, I want to just give the credit to Missouri here for the win. Like, Missouri deserves the credit. They played really well. I didn't expect K-State to give up 30 points to anybody, right, let alone Missouri. And so is Missouri the best team they've played? Yes. I mean, clearly they are, right? It's the road test. It's all of these things. I mean, you look at it, Will Howard played well, right? They didn't run the ball as well as you'd like to see him run the ball. They mixed it up a little bit. RJ Garcia was quiet. I don't really know how to digest the game big picture, Tommy. It doesn't shake me from the fact that K-State needs to be, competitive right at the top of the Big 12. It doesn't shake me from their chances really to win the Big 12. I don't think, maybe a little bit. I think they just went on the road and got beat by a team that's better than we thought they were. For sure. And look, Missouri was jacked up for that game.
Oh, they were. They got up for that game. They got up for that game for sure. And there had been talk all week long. On Friday, we talked to Wyatt Thompson about that a little bit, about the talk between both of these programs throughout the entire week. And, Missouri got up for it. The fans in Columbia got up for it. They were ready to go. And there's some talent on that team that for Missouri that it wasn't that I hadn't recognized it. I just needed proof that they could put it together. Like, I think Brady Cook is a good quarterback, but I had never really, in my mind, seen him put it together in a big time spot like that against a top 15 team at home. And he did. Luther Burden is a problem. He's a great wide receiver. And he played really well in that game for the Tigers also. So they got up for it. They were ready to go. They played to their opponent. And I think that they played a little bit above their projections. I'm not ready yet to say that I think that they're going to be any kind of, contender in the SEC. But I do think that that's a really good quality win for Missouri.
I mean, it's an incredible win for Missouri. One of the bigger wins they've had, I don't know, in a long time, I think. We'll see. I wonder if they can be competitive in the SEC. I don't know.
I don't think
Look, and
will.
it could also be a one-off too, right? It was just this was the game that they were the most fired up for, and it got away from K-State. And could they have won in overtime? Like, I don't want to say that it cost them the game, that field goal, because who knows that they would have even won in overtime. But here's my concern, Tommy, is that UCF has looked pretty dang good. They've got 2 big wins against bad teams, but they went on the road and they beat Boise. They've got to go to K-State now. Like, I think it makes me worry about that game a little bit more, for sure, than maybe I would have been. Like, if K-State's capable of losing to Missouri like that on the road, aren't you a little more concerned about UCF, who's, I don't think they've been surprising. It's not that, because they were predicted to be the best of the new Big 12 teams, but they went on the road and beat Boise, and that's never an easy thing to do or something to overlook. And in their 2 games against lesser opponents, they've blown them out of the water. So UCF worries me a little bit here.
Well, and look, the one thing about UCF, and that Gus Malzahn is going to use this as motivation. Whenever anybody talks about the top tier in the Big 12, at least through the first 2 weeks, it's been Texas, it's been Oklahoma, and it's been K-State, right? Like, those have been the 3 teams. Well, and here's UCF. They're 3-0, and nobody is talking about them in the upper tier of the Big 12. Now, you did mention that they've been widely considered the best of the newcomers in the Big 12, and I think that that's accurate, but nobody's really yet said, okay, UCF is potentially in contention to win a Big 12 title. Do I think that they're that good when you compare them to a Texas or an OU? Probably not. But man, they started 3-0, and like you mentioned, they beat Boise. So, I think that Gus Malzahn on the road. I think Gus Malzahn will use that as motivation, saying, "Look, nobody is considering us as potentially a contender to win a Big 12 title. Let's beat the Wildcats here, and then all of a sudden, in our first conference game, we'll be able to make a statement and show, hey, we do belong here in the Big 12."
They do belong in the Big 12, by the way. Of all the teams that joined, just kind of taking a step back, like, they're as big picture intriguing as any school. It's a huge enrollment in a region of the country that they could really, that here's what I would say. I would be willing to bet that of all the new teams, not the current new teams, right? They have the chance to grow the most out of the jump to the Big 12. Like, they could really elevate that program. They've got the coach that probably can do that. They're in the region where that could happen. They've got the massive school and enrollment and all of those things. They're certainly going to be a team to watch as they grow into the Big 12.
One thing about UCF too that I think is going to be a factor, and I think it already has been a little bit and will continue to be this way, is they're kind of out on an island by themselves. A lot of times, even though they're good, don't get me wrong, they're 3-0. I forget about them occasionally. I forget that they're in the Big 12, because they're all by themselves down there in Florida, right? And so you can use that as an advantage. You can use it, in a lot of different ways, saying, hey, people forget about us. They don't think about us. That there's not another Big 12 team within 10 hours from us. Like, there's a lot of, they're out by themselves. So they can sort of operate in this way where, think about KU and K-State. They're an hour away from each other, right? And so you always know, one program knows what the other one's doing and the way that all works. UCF can use that to their advantage, that they're all out there by themselves. They can kind of operate without anybody knowing what they're doing. And then, oh, by the way, here's UCF. They're 3-0. And especially once you add in those Pac-12 teams next year in the Big 12, they're really going to be out on an island all by themselves, and they can definitely use that to their advantage.
Yeah, look, it's a game. We'll talk a whole lot more about this game. It's an evening game. It's FS1. It's got a nice little window here to profile K-State again, but we'll have Tim Fitzgerald later in the week, Wyatt Thompson, to really dig into UCF and what they've done is they'll study up on them. So we'll have that later this week. Really just like a bummer loss to K-State. I hate that got away from them that way. It does deflate the sales just a little bit, Tommy, as they, I haven't even looked at the new AP top 25. Where did that drop them? Have you looked at that?
Oh, they're
yet?
out. Yeah, they completely dropped out of the polls.
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's
They are
a little much.
out of the polls.
That's a little much. I don't know about that, but whatever. That's what happens when you lose early.
And
you know what? They have a chance to get right back in there. But yikes.
I would have been a little bit more understanding of Kansas State dropping out of the polls if the pollsters had put Missouri in the top 25. And
Missouri
Missouri's
got a
not
few.
even in
I'm
the
looking
top
at it
25.
now. They
got some votes.
They did get a few more.
They got some votes, but I feel like, all right, you drop from 15th all the way out, and then you've got Missouri coming in somewhere in the upper 20s. That didn't happen. I mean, like, Missouri's not even in the top 25, and so I don't like that. I feel like that's kind of a bum rap for both of those teams.
It's probably fair. I mean, 2-1 Florida's in there, 2-1 Tennessee. Everybody else in Alabama has the loss to Texas. Oh, LSU has the loss to Florida State. It's probably fair. I mean, I'm not looking at any of the teams of the top 25 and be like, oh, yeah, Kansas State has to be in over them. So I guess it's fair. It's just an early season loss, but still, again, deflated the sales a little bit. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll go back to the NFL. Odds to win a Super Bowl have changed in an interesting way. We want to take a bigger picture look through 2 weeks. Have our thoughts changed on the contenders at all at this point of the season? 869-1240 is the number to call. Let's do our last giveaway here to the IHOP hotline, brought to you by IHOP, where guests can enjoy 4 new sweet and savory biscuit options. We have tickets to opening night of the animated feature, Paw Patrol, the mighty movie. Great family opportunity here. You can get a sneak peek and get those at Boulevard Theater in Town West, September 29th at 7 o'clock. That's next Friday, I believe. Yeah, next Friday. Paw Patrol tickets. First caller to the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. We'll come back. More NFL talk after this.
Sports Daily is on KFH.
All right, congratulations, Jim, winning the Paw Patrol tickets. My kids will be pretty excited about that movie. That's the IHOP hotline that Jim called in. It is open the rest of the way, 869-1240. Jacob Albracht alongside Tommy Castor here. It is Sports Daily. Tommy, let's go back to the NFL. We talked about the Chiefs extensively. I go and look at odds to win the Super Bowl now. The Chiefs still tied now with San Francisco at 6-1, odds-on favorite to win it. The next biggest AFC team would be the Bills at 10-1. The Ravens at 14-1, along with the Dolphins at 14-1. The Bengals sit at 18-1 right now. The Jags drop all the way down to 25-1. As far as winning the AFC, you've got the Chiefs at just under 3-1, Bills 5-1, Ravens, Dolphins 7-1. So the Chiefs are still the favorite. I certainly agree with that, and I would probably be comfortable elevating San Francisco. The Cowboys and Eagles fall in at 8-1 right after that. It's interesting now that we've got 3 NFC teams higher than every AFC team outside of the Chiefs. I thought that was something interesting there. So as we look big picture here, I think the Bills bounce back the way we needed to see them bounce back. San Francisco, Dallas, Philadelphia, I'm fine with that. It really was, we thought it was going to be Philadelphia, San Francisco anyway. I think based on what we've seen, we can probably get Dallas closer to that, just through 2 weeks. And they've got another cupcake this week. We'll see them play the Eagles twice. I think that'll give it, and we actually see them play the 49ers too. So we'll get some direct competition there. So that will help. As far as the AFC though, Tommy, I mean, are you willing to drop Cincinnati that low? Again, it's 1-7, by the way, over his career that Joe Burrow has started seasons in his first 2 games. He's won 1 time in 8 tries in his first 2 games. So I think we probably are overreacting to Cincinnati because we've seen this before. I think his calf is clearly bothering him. The only way it's the appropriate reaction is if that calf lingers, and it might. That's sort of the elephant in the room. But if Burrow can, get back to full strength, I think they're going to be okay. But, it's aggravated again here.
Well, so 2 reasons why I think that it is okay to start to panic a little bit about the Bengals and why I am okay with their Super Bowl odds dropping is, number one, that calf injury. Yeah, I mean, like that, he did re-aggravate it yesterday from what he said. And it doesn't look like it's something that is going to go away anytime soon. It might be something he has to play through. So yeah, he has always started pretty slow in his career, but he's also, not had a calf injury to deal with also. And so that might be something that lingers, and clearly affecting him as this season goes on. Number 2, the Bengals are not only 0-2 to start the season, they're 0-2 in their division. Both of their losses to start the year have been in their division, which is an incredibly tough division in the NFL. They lost to the Browns, they lost to the Bengals, or they lost to the Ravens yesterday. And so they're 0-2 in that division. If that doesn't get turned around quickly, they're going to have to do some work. You're looking at a wild card spot potentially and road games in the playoffs. If they can, get some wins, I think at this point, when you drop to 0-2 to start the season in your division, it's going to be that much difficult to win the division, try to get a home game, seeding in the AFC, all of that. So those are a couple of reasons why I do think it is fair to drop the Bengals down as far as their odds to win a Super Bowl, because that path gets that much more difficult for them.
So they're down there. Who's the most deceptive team that has struggled so far? Let me phrase that like, who of the teams that have gotten out to these rocky starts do you think present the best opportunity to still be a contender? So the Chargers sit down at 30-1 at 0-2. The Vikings sit down at 66-1.
Give me the Vikings. And I'm looking at them right now at 70-1. Some of the odds that I'm looking at with the Vikings. Give me them, mainly because of the division they're playing in. The Bears look like trash. The Packers collapsed against the Falcons. And then the Lions fell apart against the Seahawks. The Vikings, I know they're 0-2. I know that. I understand all of that, and that's why they're down where they're at. But that division is not great. And I don't know. I mean, I just feel like with
And
Kirk
they have
Cousins, Justin
made-
Jefferson,
they have
Jordan Addison,
done
all of that.
everything that they can do to lose those games, right?
Yep.
Like just mistake after mistake after mistake after turnover in the like most critical moments. Now that stuff can continue, certainly. But I think if I agree with you, if we're looking at that team, that it's like, my goodness, like they have done everything they possibly can to lose, and they've still they're razor thin to being 2-0. Now, some of that's a law of averages versus last year, right?
Right.
And but that offense to me,
The
with those
Vikings-
passing weapons, it's a big time offense.
The Vikings have the exact same odds right now to win the Super Bowl as the New York Jets. And I think the Vikings are head and shoulders better than the New York Jets are
Depending
right now,
on what they do
especially
at
without Aaron
quarterback, yeah.
Rodgers. They also have the same odds right now as the Patriots, as the Rams, as the Buccaneers, as the Broncos. Like they're in that same class right now. And I think the Vikings are better than all of those teams.
I do too. They were my pick to win the division, and I think that's still possible. I do think that the Packers have looked good. Packers blew that game yesterday.
Yeah, they did.
But they, they had an impressive win in week 1. I know it was against the Bears, but they and Jordan Love's look good. And they haven't had Christian Watson. They blew that game yesterday, Tommy, but they were missing arguably their 2 best offensive players, right? They didn't have Christian Watson or Aaron Jones in that game. So
I
gotta
gotta
say, blow it.
Right. I got to say also in that division, my favorite bet of the entire weekend that I placed, the Seahawks outright over the Lions. And the reason for that is because I'm not sure that any other team outside of the Jets had as much hype in the offseason as the Lions did with Dan Campbell, and how they were supposed to be, this great team and presumptive division winners and all of that. And then not only that offseason hype, they go into Kansas City, they knock off the defending champs. So hype is at an all-time high going home back to Detroit, taking on a Seahawks team that collapsed against the Rams in week number 1. But all along, I thought, you know what? The Seahawks are going to bounce back. They're going to get right, and they're going to have an opportunity to win on the road in Detroit. And they did that. I know that it was, a back and forth game for sure, but that was my favorite bet of the entire weekend, was the Seahawks over the Lions.
And mine was probably either where I got the Cowboys was ridiculous because I got it at like 3, but the Chiefs, I love the Chiefs bet. That played itself out. I actually love the Packers bet, and they paid as well. But yeah, I did. The Seahawks bounced back. That's good for them. Good for Geno Smith. Let's talk about the Chargers.
Yeah,
I don't know how Brandon Staley survived. I guess because they made the playoffs. I get that piece of it. But man, like I don't even know what to say. Like they just continue to find ways to lose games. It is remarkable how they do it. I pay attention to them. I've said it before. My wife is a Chargers fan. I cannot figure out how they find ways to lose games. They're the best at it, at finding ways to lose games. It's wild. I don't understand it. I don't know what to make of them now because, Herbert was pretty good. They didn't have Austin Eckler. I get it. But you still got to be able to beat the Titans on the road. Good for the Titans. They ran for 61 yards, and that's what Tennessee does. That's like their MO. But how do you let the Titans score 27 points when Derrick Henry didn't even get to 100 yards? Ryan Tannehill looked like the worst quarterback in the league in week 1, Tommy. He completed 20 of his 24 passes. Brandon Staley's supposed to be the defense guy. Like, that's where they brought him in for. He was the defensive whiz of the Rams.
It's what the Chargers do. It's what they've always done. They're always perceived as this incredibly, supremely talented team, and then they always underperform. And yeah, you mentioned Austin Eckler out. That clearly hurt the Chargers for sure. But looking on paper, the names on their defense, and we go through it every single year, from Joey Bosa to J.C. Jackson to all of these other defensive players that the Chargers have and have had, and then they always underperform. They are always overpromising and always under-delivering. They're probably the most untrustworthy team in the NFL. And Brandon Staley, I understand the hype around him when he came into the Chargers, but man, he's underperformed. Clearly. And, looks like he's being outcoached week in and week out. He was already on the hot seat, I think, coming into this season. And I think that hot seat is red hot right now.
Oh, he may not survive the year.
He could very easily be the very first coach fired sometime midway through the season if they don't get things turned around very quickly. I mean, Justin Herbert, we all know he's a franchise quarterback. We all know the talent they've got at wide receiver. And when Austin Eckler is healthy, he's one of the best running backs in the league. The fact that they're 0-2 right now, I mean, it's the same reason why a year ago I picked the Chargers to win the division, even though I don't like them. And then, they underperform. They always do that. I don't trust them anymore. I cannot pick them to win anything ever again because they always let you down.
Look, I don't even know who, because I agree. If I'm in charge there, I'm like, we may have to end this now. But
yeah,
I mean, I'm looking at their coaching staff. I don't know who they'd elevate. I mean, Kellen Moore just got there, and it's a bunch. I'm just looking at the names. They don't have that guy that it's like, oh, you could just elevate them. They've got the experience. They don't have them. So I don't know what they're going to do.
But why do we always do this? And by we, I mean nationally, like everybody. Why do the Chargers always get hyped up?
Because
and then they constantly are not doing anything.
Because Herbert's awesome and Bosa's awesome and Keenan Allen is incredible. And it's like, it is wild. It's wild. I think that may be one of the bigger storylines. I'm far more concerned about the Chargers, for instance, than I am the Bengals. The Dolphins got it done. They continue to just kind of chime in. I think Tua looks good, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
He's making some throws, man. But the Cowboys, are they now with San Francisco and Philadelphia, do you think, as far as Super Bowl contenders, based on what we've seen? They beat an Aaron Rodgers-less Jets, and they beat a Giants team that I don't care about the comeback yesterday against Cardinals isn't nearly as good as people think it is. Are you ready to put the Cowboys as contenders in the NFC?
Yes, and I'll tell you why I'm ready through 2 weeks, because Micah Parsons is a menace. I mean, that guy is absolutely insane. He was our pick, both of us, for Defensive Player of the Year, and for good reason. I mean, watching the game yesterday against the Jets, he was everywhere. I mean, between Micah Parsons and Chris Jones, like those two guys single-handedly impacted their respective teams' defenses more than anybody else in the entire league yesterday.
As far as what I saw, I agree. Two sacks, a forced fumble, I mean, God, and poor Aaron Rodgers. Like, could you imagine if he would have had to deal with Micah Parsons? That would have been brutal. But yeah, I guess I will very hesitantly put them there. Let me see week 5 against the 49ers. But I even
mentioned to you, like I texted you during the game and I said, man, it's like Kellen Moore leads and all of a sudden the Cowboys offense is unlocked.
The point at which you texted me that, like, their offense wasn't quite going in the game yet, but it sure did. Like, Dak looked way better in week 2 than he did in week 1, which was interesting because he was playing the Jets. I don't know what happened to the Jets' pass defense. That was weird. That was really, really weird. All right. We'll have much more, obviously, as we make our way through the week in the NFL, but just another fun and wild and crazy weekend. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on the network. It's a busy night on the network, actually, so we'll do that as Sports Daily wraps up this Monday edition.
Just call up.
All right, that's it for us here on a Monday. Always fun. Jim Rome at 11. We've got Royals Day Baseball starting at 1 o'clock. Chance to get a big game, get a big win. Bobby Witt Jr. down the stretch. You got Chris Lamb and the Coaches Show for Wichita State Volleyball at 6 o'clock, and Monday Night Football, 7 o'clock. We will have the Cleveland-Pittsburgh leg here for you on the Monday Night Football doubleheader tonight. Tommy and I will be back to take a look at that and look ahead. Chiefs executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, Dan Israel, joins us. For Tommy and Jad, I'm Jacob. See you then.